I promised I wouldn't tell anyone. I didn't pause before saying it. Didn't ask what it meant. Didn't ask how long it would last. The words came out naturally, almost automatically, like something I had already decided long before that moment. There's something dangerous about promises made out loud. Once spoken, they stop belonging to the moment. This is where people get it wrong. Promises don't disappear after they're spoken. They change. They stop living in silence. They begin to belong to consequences, to memory, to the people who will remember you saying them. At the time, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was only thinking about how I sounded, certain, reliable. I remember the way they looked at me when I said it. Not hopeful, not afraid, certain. The kind of certainty that doesn't ask for reassurance. The kind that assumes you understand what's at stake. There was no speech, no dramatic pause. Just a look that said, "You know what this means." I noticed something in myself. I nodded without realizing it. That nod felt like agreement, not just with them, but with myself. In that moment, I believed I was capable of keeping the promise. I had no reason to doubt myself. Trust didn't feel heavy. It felt affirming. People think betrayal begins with action. It doesn't. It begins with a thought. A quiet one. The kind you don't notice at first. It doesn't sound dangerous. It doesn't feel wrong. It sounds reasonable. It waits. This is how it starts. The thought came later, when I was alone. It said, "This won't change anything." It said, "This doesn't really count." And because it sounded calm, because it sounded logical, I didn't challenge it. That was the first shift. I didn't see myself as someone holding a secret. I saw myself as someone being trusted. That distinction mattered more than I realized. It softened the responsibility. It made the promise feel less fragile. Trust can feel like protection. Sometimes it feels like permission. Here's the part I missed. Responsibility doesn't change all at once. It changes quietly. The moment when trust turns into temptation doesn't announce itself. It arrives disguised as confidence. Confidence that you're still in control. I didn't notice that moment. Not then. We weren't close. Not friends. Not strangers either. We worked in the same place. Shared the same space. Passed each other often enough to stop noticing. There was nothing special about it. No conversations that lingered. No reasons to remember each other. Just routine. And routine has a way of lowering defenses. It makes things feel safe simply because they're familiar. I remember how quiet it felt at first. There was no conversation, no explanation, just silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. The kind of silence people grow used to. the kind that doesn't demand attention. Over time, that silence becomes permission. Permission to exist without explanation. They spoke while we were standing there. No hesitation, no build-up, just a sentence. I didn't interrupt, didn't react. I listened. And in that moment, something ordinary stopped being ordinary. I asked myself the question later. Why me? I wasn't closer than anyone else. I wasn't kinder. I was just there. And sometimes being there feels like safety. I noticed how carefully I held it. The secret. I treated it like something fragile, something important. Or at least I told myself I did. It changed the way I looked at them. It also changed the way I looked at myself. Here's the part I didn't admit right away. Part of me enjoyed it. Being the one who knew. Being the one who was trusted. I didn't question that feeling. I accepted it. I started thinking about it differently. Not as a secret, as responsibility. Something I had been chosen to carry. That idea mattered more than I realized. This was the moment things shifted. Not suddenly, quietly. Responsibility can become identity, and identity can become an excuse. I didn't see it at the time, but the seed was already there. Someone asked a question, not directly, not in a way that demanded an answer. It was casual, almost careless. I remember the exact moment it happened, because nothing about it felt important at the time. That's what made it dangerous. I noticed myself hesitate, just for a second. I could have ignored it, could have let it pass. Instead, I stayed, and that was enough. I told myself I was thinking, that I was choosing my words carefully. But really, I was deciding whether silence still mattered. The answer came faster than I expected. It felt easy. I remember thinking this clearly. I can stop right now. Nothing has happened yet. But the thought didn't stay long. It moved aside. I didn't say everything. I didn't say names. I didn't give details. I told myself that meant I was still loyal, that what I was doing didn't really count. I justified it quietly. I told myself it was vague, that it couldn't hurt anyone, that silence still existed somewhere inside what I said. I watched the room change, not suddenly, just enough to notice. Interest replaced neutrality. I knew then the words no longer belonged to me. That was the moment I lost control of it. Not because I said too much, but because I said anything at all. Once released, it moved on without me. I went home that night believing it was over, that nothing would come of it, that the moment had passed. I told myself I was still the same person. I wasn't. The choice had already been made. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. And quietly was enough. Days passed. Nothing happened at first. No messages. No questions. Life continued the way it always does when consequences are waiting. I told myself that was a good sign, that maybe nothing had changed, that maybe I had worried for nothing. I started noticing small things, a different tone, a shorter response, the absence of something that used to be there. It wasn't obvious, but it was consistent. I understood before anything was said, before there was proof. Trust doesn't disappear loudly. It fades. And once it does, it doesn't ask to be explained. They never confronted me. There was no argument, no accusation. They didn't need to. The distance said everything. I wanted to explain myself, to say it wasn't intentional, that I hadn't meant to hurt anyone. I rehearsed those words, but I never said them. I realized explanations don't restore trust. They only describe the damage. So I stayed silent. Not out of strength, out of understanding. We stopped talking after that. Not suddenly, completely. No final conversation. No closure. Just absence. I still think about the promise. Not because I broke it, but because I didn't understand its weight until someone else carried the cost. Trust was given, and I let it disappear.